So today I have a little canning project. I'm going to can up the ground beef that I got at my Amish bulk food store, and I thought I would just bring you along with me. So I did start by defrosting my ground beef in the fridge for a few days before it was ready for canning. And because the 10 pounds I got from my Amish bulk food store was not enough to fill up my canner, I actually went out to my local grocery store and got another. It was just under 12 pounds, so I could make a full canner run. So the first thing I'm going to do is start. So apparently my phone had different ideas than taking videos today. So I'm going to take pictures and I'm going to just plow ahead. And at the end, it switches back to video. So stick with me. So the first thing I'm going to do is brown up my meat. So while my meat is browning in my electric skillet, I put all my jars into my oven to sanitize at 215 for 20 minutes. And I did wash my jars in some warm soapy water with some vinegar and then rinse them well with some clean water before I put them in my oven to sanitize. So now that my meat is brown, I'm going to strain it. And because it's an 80-20 blend, I'm actually going to rinse it with some hot water. Now I used my kettle for this. I heated it as much as I could and then I ran it over my browned ground beef. I used about 2 cups to rinse my browned ground beef, and don't throw this liquid away. I will tell you what I did with mine at the end. So now that my ground beef is browned and ready to go in jars, I have my lids in some warm water, not boiling, with some white vinegar, and my jars out of the oven ready to go with my funnel to be filled with my ground beef. I also have on my side my jar lifter and a little dish of white vinegar so I can wipe my rims. Now I'm going to fill up my jars with my browned ground beef, and I'm going to leave 1 inch of headspace, making sure I debubble and wipe my rims of my jars really well. So now that I have my jars filled up, I'm going to, I wouldn't say debubble necessarily at this point, but just use my silicone spatula just to make sure the meat is packed in really well and I'm getting at least a pound in each jar. So once I've done that, I come in with some hot boiling water and I fill it to 1 inch headspace. You can use broth, but I use water. And the next step is debubble. You want to do this really well. And you want to try to stay away from metal utensils in your jars at this point. I use the handle of a silicone spatula. Next, we're going to wipe the rims of our jars with some white vinegar, and I use a paper towel. I find that a lot easier to use, and make sure you're getting it really clean. You don't want any food debris or any liquids along here because that can impact your seal. So next, I'm putting on my lids. I have my jar lifter. I've taken them out of my warm water. And I do that because I want to ensure my seal, give it the best chance it has that my jars will seal. So next goes on the rings. Now I have a tendency to tighten them down too tight. So what I do is I tighten them down with one hand, and as soon as my jar starts moving, I stop. Tightening them down too much can lead to siphoning. My canner is ready. I have the correct amount of water. You have to check for your canner depending on what you're using. It is warm water because my jars are warm and I want my canner to be warm. You want everything to be about the same temp. So into the canner they go. I am using my 23 quart Presto canner. So I am able to stack 10 in the bottom and 10 in the top. So after they're processed and you take them out of the canner, you want to rest them on a tea towel. You don't want to rest them on a direct cold counter. I will also cover my jars with a tea towel for the night and then come back to them tomorrow just to keep them from getting too cold too quickly, which can lead to jars breaking or not sealing. Next day, and my jars have sat overnight. It's been almost 24 hours. So it's time to get the rings off and wash them up and label them and put them into my long-term like home canning area. Not really long-term because we'll work through this within the next little while, probably within the next year or so, because it's meat and we don't have that much of hamburger left. I think there's only like maybe half of a case or one case down there. So, but this is what they look like. I don't like, see, my water, I can't say it's necessarily hard, but I put vinegar in it because I don't want the cloudiness on the jar, but then it does that to the rings in the first instance, the first time I use them. So I can't even really use them again. So I have to be throwing them away quite often, and that creates a problem because I need to buy more, and I'm not able to find them at the moment. So, but anyway, this is how they look. They do have a ring of fat on them, which is a lot less than I usually get. Usually I get a thick one like that when I don't rinse them. But this is what they look like. They look so good. It did all seal by the looks of them, but I will take the rings off. Let me see if I can get one off. Take the rings off and do what I call a fingertip test, which is basically just hold them up by the fingertips like that. And if they're sealed, they should hold. So just from the weight of the contents of the jar. And they're good to go. I'm going to wash them up, label them, and put them in my cold storage. So somebody said in a video that they wouldn't run their canner, their Presto canner, the 23 quart, on a glass top stove. This is what I use. This is my glass top stove. I've used this for as long as I've had my canner, and I use this specific one 100% of the time. I don't think I've used any of the other ones. What I will say is that I haven't had any problems or anything with it. It works great. It's worked fine for me. I haven't seen any cracking or anything like that. But I will say that I wish I had gas. I don't like the element when it shuts off and then powers back on, whereas gas, you would have a constant flow. So I have to constantly watch my gauge so it doesn't go past or above where I want it. I have a sweet spot on my stove that I marked out, and that's working really good for me. So you have to find that sweet spot no matter what stove you use, but I find it more difficult, or, well, this is my only experience on a glass top stove. And you can check with your manufacturer depending on what stove you have. I have a Frigidaire. That's what I'm using, and it's working out great for me. So if you're thinking about canning and that's one of the drawbacks, I have been canning on a glass top stove, and I'm going to continue because this is what I have. So here are my jars, cleaned, labeled, and ready to go into my cold room. So you thought I forgot. But here is what I do with my drippings and liquid I get off my meat. So for the gelatin part, which is the liquid, it should gel. Mine always did. I actually make it into what I call bouillons. And I put them into silicone cupcake liners, put it in the freezer, and use it in soups, stews, chili, just about everything. I cook rice in it sometimes, depending on what meal I do. And then for the actual fat part, I actually put it into jars, pressure can it, and it becomes tallow. And I can use that in a number of different ways, including frying onions and veggies, pie crusts, so many different things you could do with that. And if you want to see how I do that, I'll link it in the iCard here. Thank you, friends, for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and click that notification bell to be notified when I upload videos.